Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. Thanks for your patience today. I've been trying to get some videos queued up. I was having some boomer problems. Not really boomer. Boomer in the way that Gen Z uses the term boomer. Anyone who's older than Gen Z. But welcome and thank you for your patience. It is Friday, October 27th. And if it's your first time here, this is just a live show we do on Deprogrammed on Mondays and Fridays, where you hang out at 1 o'clock Central. We talk about what's in the news, or we talk about what's on our mind. Sometimes we have guests. And today we're going to be talking about something local, but I think it applies to you. It definitely applies to you wherever you are, because this is spread across the country. Unfortunately, social justice ideology, woke ideology has spread all across the states and most of the West. And so, you may find this useful even if you don't live here. We're going to be talking about Georgetown, Texas. So Georgetown, Texas had its first Pride event last night, October 26th, at the Georgetown Public Library, and several of us went to peacefully protest. And so I have some photos and I have some video, and we're gonna look through some of that and kind of process it together, and maybe offer some advice and tips for if you find yourself surrounded by protesters at an event. What are some mistakes you should not make? What are some things you should do? How to handle yourself? And also what to do if you are a protester at an event. Before we do that, I just wanted to say today, October 27th, is my fourth year of sobriety. Or I've been sober 4 years today. I guess that's the way you put it. And praise God, because I never would have thought that would have been possible just a few short years ago. And I'm just very grateful. And if you are someone who's listening who struggles with any kind of crutch, whether it's alcohol or anything else, whether it's a substance or whether it's something like porn. I've had someone write me before about their porn addiction and how me talking about quitting drinking had helped them think about their porn addiction. And so if whatever it is, I just want to say it is possible to quit it. And that you can get into those stages where you think, I can't do this. I've tried too many times. I guess I'm never going to quit this thing, where you just sort of succumb and you just give in to that and you let that demon control you. If you think of it like a demon, even if you don't believe in demons, but as an analogy, you let that own you. You become a slave to it. And I promise you, you can stop being a slave to it. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter who you are. And I mean, if I can do that, anyone can do that. So thank you for the congratulations. Adam says Georgetown, DC. No, we're going to be talking about Georgetown, Texas. That's what we're talking about today. So Georgetown, Texas is a beautiful community about half an hour north of Austin. And the slogan for Austin is "Keep Austin Weird." And that some of you have heard that, even if you're not from Texas. And it sort of had to do with this weird, like fun, hippie counterculture in the 70s. Willie Nelson really brought a lot. He's credited with really bringing a lot of the cowboys together with the hippies and just having this beautiful place of music and culture and interesting people. And a lot of that's changed. If you go down to downtown Austin now, we were just there a couple nights ago. There was a Based Austin event, which was fabulous. But so we were in Austin for that. But Austin as a whole, very woke, also very expensive and very impoverished. So it's starting to become a lot like Los Angeles, where I used to live for a while. Congress is almost unrecognizable. If you used to, from even just 3 or 4 short years ago, unrecognizable. If you haven't been to Austin to Congress in a while, it's starting to look like Rodeo Drive in LA. They have pushed out all the mom and pop businesses. Uh, the boot shop I used to work at had to move way down the street. Everyone's like, they can't afford the rent anymore. Like when I was working at that boot shop, they were basically told they were raising everybody's rent like 10 times. Not raising it 10 individual times. I'm saying they were multiplying by 10 and saying this is your rent now, which is crazy. And people who had been there for years, like there was this great shop, you guys might remember, Turquoise Door, and it was owned by this old gay couple. They had the best art, and I got the earrings that people always like, the ones with the Virgin Mary on them. I got those there. They did all kinds of art from around the world and different jewelry and things like that. Anyway, Turquoise Door, they got pushed out. And so now it looks like Beverly Hills. There's these they've built all these disgusting condos and parking garages and shopping centers. And they have, things like, it looks like Tiffany's and all these expensive chain stores, and just so gross, almost like that, like an SNL skit. Like you look in the window and it's these Beverly Hills style shops where they have very minimalist, like one shirt on a table. And I'm like, this is not Austin. So gross. So that's what's been happening there. And oh, guys, I went way down a rabbit hole. Now I'm like, how did I get on the subject of trash in Austin again? Okay, I was telling you where Georgetown is. Okay, so Georgetown is about 30 minutes north of Austin. And unfortunately, what's happening to Austin and that change that's happening, it's not just that it's getting expensive, it's also becoming it's becoming a shithole, to borrow a term from the former president. If you go to 6th Street, it's the opposite. All these longtime businesses boarded up, broken windows, Black Lives Matter spray paint, graffiti, drug addicts passed out in the street in the middle of the day. That's 6th Street. That's starting to look like Skid Row. So you've got the two extremes, just like LA. And you've got tons of these Californian and Colorado and New York people moving in. They're not Texans. Now, the cultural refugees I know who've been moving here, like Gary from Neurotic, and people who really want to become a Texan, I say, come on, we need you. But the people who are coming in are like, oh my God, it's so cute, I live in Austin. Like it's disgusting. I don't have a lot of patience for it. We're trying to get into another Los Angeles. I mean, that's basically what they're trying to do. And so some of that has been moving forward to Georgetown. So there are a lot of people moving in from out of state, from these blue cities, and a lot of woke missionaries coming in with their ideology. They're not cultural refugees. They're cultural missionaries. They're coming to save the souls of Georgetown, Texas. They're coming to spread woke ideology to all the uneducated bigots. That's really the way they think of themselves. They put themselves on this moral and intellectual high horse that's completely unearned. And so it's been spilling into Georgetown slowly. And there are Californians moving there directly, people from Boston, Chicago, Colorado, New York. There's also people from Austin, because Austin's becoming so expensive because of the influx now, that there are wokies from Austin who are now moving up to Georgetown and discovering Georgetown. Oh my God, we discovered Georgetown. We're going to turn it into another Austin. And so you're starting to see some of this in the shops there. You can definitely see a difference. And in some of the people and in some of the Facebook forums and groups, this sort of faux intellectual and moral superiority, and this missionary mindset of, we are going to convert this town, and oh my God, it's so terrible, everyone's such a bigot here in Texas. So that's been coming in. And so with that, you've got people, you've got activists. I can't stand activists. I don't care what kind. I can't stand people who think of themselves as an activist. That's not true. I know, and I'm friendly with and friends with some people who probably consider themselves an activist. I shouldn't say that. It puts me off a little bit to describe yourself that way. but that's another story. So you have activists there. You have these activists, and there's some of them who show up at every single protest. They started a few years ago protesting BLM, Black Lives Matter, burn, loot, murder, buying large mansions. Buying large mansions is out there pretty much every weekend. It's mostly white people, as you can imagine, white wokies. And they are trying to pressure the city council to remove our our veteran statue. It's not for any specific person. It's honoring veterans who died. It's honoring people who died in the Civil War. They have a problem with it. It's the standard thing that they've done in every these totalitarians are doing in every city, where they're trying to erase history, to change statues, to basically everything they do is to try and gain and exert power over local government and over the people. They worship power. Power is at the center of social justice and woke ideology. And they're seeking power in Georgetown. And one of the ways they do that is if they can eventually get the city council to buckle and get down on their knees and kiss their pinky ring and move the statue. Which is why I absolutely oppose moving the statue. You don't give these communists an inch. You don't give these wokies an inch. However you want to think of them. They're very similar to communists, whether they identify as such or not. You don't give them an inch. There's an old church saying, if you give the devil an inch, he'll take a mile. That is absolutely true for people in the woke ideology, for the activists in the woke ideology. So they're out there every weekend, and you recognize some of the faces. Several of them also travel all the way to Austin. They go to they go to Taylor, they go to Temple. I've seen them at several events. They come to our events. Some of them were at the Let Women Speak event we did in Austin. Oh, myself and Megan Murphy and Michelle Evans. This is a couple months ago. Same people, always out there. You'll see some of them in these pictures. Some of them were at the library events that Michelle Evans and others put on. Saw same people, there they were. I'm sure they see me and they're like, she's always there. Here I am at your event. Hello. So they had their first Pride, and here's the reason why I was out there. The people who organized this are, first of all, you should know they're not from Georgetown. They're not even from Texas. They are people who moved here from, I believe one of the organizers is originally from Boston. So you get the idea. They're implants bringing woke ideology here. And so this was the first big event. They had a pastor speaking there. Here, let me pull this up. Who is not from Georgetown or Austin, but who is a recent migrant and cultural missionary. Her name is Milo Grant. And she, I guess, first came out as lesbian, then came out as a trans man and insisted on he, him pronouns, then came out as non-binary and now prefers they, them pronouns. I love the whole, the ones who become NB, because that's not a thing. I know I'm going to annoy some people who may be listening, but that's not a thing. There are many trans people who will agree that that's not it. That's like the ultimate in narcissism of like, I'm neither. I'm they, them. Please use pronouns that don't even make sense, So that tells you a little bit about, tells me a little bit about this person and the narcissism of this person. So they had Milo Grant there. This was at the Georgetown Public Library last night. Milo Grant presenting a sermon on religion and queerness. And then they had the block party outside in the parking lot across from the library. Now, this was hosted by, like I said, this very new chapter of Georgetown PRIDE, brought to us by some cultural missionaries who are new to Texas, and by the local college here, of course, the Southwestern University Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Center. They have a DI center, guys. If you've been here long enough, you know what those words mean. Okay, so because this was happening, and to let people know that our slogan is not the slogan of Austin's. Austin's is, keep Austin weird. Georgetown slogan, we're making this a thing. And if you are local, I want you to pick this up and spread it. We're going to do stickers. We're going to do the whole shebang because it's kind of funny. It's, if you know the Austin slogan, it's a little jokey, but it's also serious. Our slogan is keep Georgetown normal. So to keep Georgetown normal, we decided to go out and do a peaceful protest. Now, the number one reason that I was there is because a lot of the people there claimed, including this pastor, Milo Grant, claimed to support, they support what is called, by in Orwellian terms, our culture is currently calling gender affirming care, which, if you want to explain what that is the medical sterilization, sometimes chemical castration, the mutilation of children, radical double mastectomies, skin grafts from the arm for children. So several of these people, including this pastor, Milo Grant, see no problem in society and doctors cutting up kids in the name of this ideology. But worse, she pushes this in the name of God. I think she's committing one of the greatest evils, which is to lead little kids astray in one of the worst ways you could. Misusing God's name to justify something depraved on kids. So that's why I was there. I'm going to just show you just a couple of things from that Milo has shared, so you can get an idea of her politics. Let's see. I've got share screen. Give me 1 second. Oh, there we go. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that Reverend Milo Grant shares. This was a meme or post by someone else that says, if you're celebrating Jesus as Prince of Peace this holiday season, I hope you remember this. Peace is a demand for liberation. It insists on the abolition of all oppressive systems and ideologies. This is the purpose of Jesus's kingdom. Peace is not for passive, unengaged folks. So you can see some of the red flags, the keywords there that let you know this person is squarely in the social justice faith, in the woke faith, not in the Christian faith. But the Christian faith is a cloak in the case of Milo Grant. The Christian faith is a cloak. They're taking a contradictory belief system, completely contradictory belief system, and they're trying to mask it as Christianity. Hold on, I've got another. There's so many of them. Okay, so this is one that tells you about what Reverend Milo Grant believes about medically and surgically mutilating kids. So Milo shared this post that said, I saw this, and it's a picture of some graffiti that says act out. And Milo said, I saw this as I drove to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services council hearing, where 30 people read anonymous personal stories from trans families pleading for TDFP to cease and recant the targeting of trans youth. And I went and I watched this council hearing that she's talking about, and I saw her read someone's letter. What she's talking about here is, this is a reverend who claims to be a Christian, who is saying that Texas needs to stop protecting children from medical and surgical mutilation. Because that's what this was in response to. This is when Texas said, you know what, if you want to abuse your kids, you're not going to do it in Texas. If you want to cut your children's breasts off before they're 18, you're not going to do it anymore in Texas. You have been doing it, but you're not going to do it here anymore. If you want to put your children, your minors, on drugs that could possibly sterilize them for life, make them medical patients for life, cause irreversible damage to, as we are hearing from detransitioners all the time, to their voice, to their endocrine system, to, in the case of Prisha, who's one of the women who is suing, a detransitioner who is suing, who still has problems with facial hair. Her voice will never be the same. If she's able to conceive, she'll never be able to breastfeed her children. She had a double mastectomy. So this is someone who, in the name of God, is supporting the medical establishment, big pharma, the corporations, and the government surgically and medically mutilating children, sterilizing them. That's evil. Now, there are several other of these screenshots, but here's one where she shares something from the Church of Satan. I don't have time to go through all of these. Maybe later. Let me look at a few of them. Oh, okay, I do. I have to put up just 2 more here. Okay. I will share this Church of Satan one. Can you see that? Okay. So this was a Christian pastor, supposedly Christian reverend, who shared this post from the Church of Satan and says, any discussion about what the Bible does or doesn't condone is a distraction. Oh, it is? Really? You're a reverend. It's a distraction to talk about what the Bible says? And you will notice if you watch her sermons, which I did, I watched several of them to get an idea of who she was. She doesn't really draw on the Bible very much. Most of her sermons, she draws on, and I like it, by the way. I like when a pastor or reverend brings in lots of different sources, but their primary text is the scripture, is the Bible. And my pastor brings in lots of different sources, but his primary text is the Bible. It all goes back to the Bible. He's teaching a lesson about scripture, and he's using other sources to support or to contradict and make comments about or think about the scripture. He's bringing in other sources to lift the scripture up so we can discuss that piece of scripture and understand it better. Milo's sermons bring in lots of different sources, but the focus is on those sources. One of her sermons was almost entirely on a Brené Brown quote and reading something from Brené Brown. Another of her sermons was almost entirely on the Color Purple script. I'm not kidding. And again, I like those kind of diverse, what that word actually means, from a variety of different places. I like that kind of inclusion, to use another one of their words, in a sermon. Again, when the primary source and what you're there to talk about is the scripture, but her sermons are they're not really about the Bible. They're about all these different pop culture things. So here she shares this post from the Church of Satan. Any discussion about what the Bible does or doesn't condone is a distraction. The U.S. is not a theocracy, and religious texts should not be used as the basis or justification of public policy ever. So that is from someone who's supposedly a Christian reverend. I've got another one here, which tells you again about who this reverend, what she really worships, who she really worships. Here's another one that she shared that says, this pastor will marry you and support you as you access reproductive care. And it's a rainbow flag, and then it says, full stop, no exceptions. I'm doing a little bit of the Josh Slocum voice. I've been listening too much of him this week. If you haven't watched Josh Slocum on the Disaffected podcast, you got to go check it out. he's got the voice that he does. So anyway, full stop, no exceptions. That's my attempt to do the voice. And so, basically this is a Christian reverend saying, I will help you have an abortion, kill your baby. Now, regardless of what you think of whether abortion should be legal or not, I don't know any Christian who thinks it's moral. It's a different thing to talk about whether something should be legal or not and whether it's moral or not. And so what this supposedly Christian reverend is saying to me is, yeah, you can murder your baby. It's fine. I'll help you. Which is weird. It's a little weird, to say the least. Now, I like I said, I have so many more of these, but I don't have time to show them all because I want to get to. There's a lot of buildup for the protest last night. So that's why I was there. And several people from my church at Church on the Square, including my pastor, Bradley Helgerson, were there. Several other friends. Jean from the chat was there, who was so lovely to see her. She brought my husband and I a belated wedding gift. It was so cool. Who else? I mean, there were friends and there were some people I didn't know. And our group was maybe, I don't know, 20 people. It wasn't a lot of us. And they had a whole, we didn't go inside. I didn't go inside for the lecture by Milo. We were outside where the festivities, the event was happening, the big block party. So they had all these tables with vendors set up. And immediately you see the usual suspects. The ones who I mentioned are the professional activists who show up at every one of these things and show up at all of our events. And they all started lining up with their trans flags and signs and yelling and trying to taunt us across the street. And couple things happened. This Williamson Sun reporter came over, this young lady, and we actually had a very, I think, productive conversation. I was pleasantly surprised to find that she seemed very open to things she didn't know about or maybe hadn't heard about. And we talked about a few things and had a good back and forth and exchange. And that was encouraging because I know she's on the left. She was squarely with, that ideology on that side of the road. But one of the things I said to her was, has the Williamson County Sun, which is the local paper, ever considered actually talking to people who oppose this ideology or events like this and helping people to better understand why we do? Because, I've written a letter to the editor. They don't publish it, of course, about woke ideology, but they publish a lot of woke letters. They publish a lot of woke op-eds about, things like moving the statue that I mentioned in the town square and things like supporting drag for kids or, cutting up children and sterilizing kids. So would you want to know, have you guys ever considered talking to people about why we're here? Because you have a lot of, usually I find that on your side, there are a lot of assumptions, incorrect assumptions being made. And it's easier sometimes just to write people off and think what their opinions are and why they're standing there when they're not. For example, did you know there are a lot of transgender people who oppose events like this? She seemed shocked, like as if she doesn't know that. Do you know there are a lot of gay people who oppose events like this? Again, I don't think she understood that. I mean, my necklace here, my miraculous medallion, this was a gift to me from one of my trans friends, not someone who's in the public eye, not someone I've interviewed on the show and never will, someone who's just a friend who gave this to me out of love. Would someone on the left, this leftist, ever think that? No. They say things all the time. They make these assumptions like, and I saw this in some of the footage I was watching of Milo Grant at the council meeting, where these leftists are up there at the podium and lecturing people and saying, maybe you should just meet some trans people. And they're making the assumption, the implication, and the accusation, not only that trans people all agree with them, which is false, but they're also making the assumption, the implication, the accusation that you don't know any trans people. And so I have my response to that is actually, maybe you guys should meet some trans people and some gay people who don't agree with you. I mean, seriously, broaden your social circle. How closed off and cult-like are you if the only gay and trans people you know are people who are woke? Like, get outside of. I'm happy to make introductions through the podcast. There are interviews you can check out. I mean, if you go through the deprogrammed archives, if anybody from Georgetown, from the left, from the woke contingent is here, and some of the people I talked with last night, go through the interview archives, please. Watch the interview with Sarah Higdon. Sarah Higdon's a trans woman who disagrees with cutting up kids and pushing trans ideology on kids. Familiarize yourself with people who disagree with you, with their arguments, with their opinions. At least you owe it to yourself. You're an adult. You're capable of hearing the other side of an argument. Watch the interviews with Mikey Harlow. Watch the interview with my friend Suhaila, who's a trans woman and Hindu and anti-woke. So if you have a prejudice against Christianity or you can't listen to a Christian, go listen to that one. There are a ton of gay and lesbian and trans people with gender dysphoria who do not agree with woke ideology, with social justice, with transing children. And if you're on the left, you need to broaden your social circle and meet some people who are different from you. So, okay, back to last night. So speaking of that, I'm going to start with one of the most surprising things. Actually, no, let me start with the clowns. Okay. The actual clowns. And then I'm going to do the good news surprising thing. Okay, so these are 3 of the clowns. Here on the left, and I'm going to use the names of 2 of these people because they're public people and they make their names known and they're at every single protest. And the guy in the middle is filing lawsuits against the city and is always trying to get his name out there and run for office and failed campaigns. And so they are public people, the 2 on the left. The one on the right is not. So on the left, we have Brian Register. Brian is the one dressed in the American flag. Now, you will see in Georgetown, Texas, it may confuse you. Oh, why do they dress in American flags? It's actually, I commend them. If I were on their side, I would do the same. They're trying to make the point that they are Americans and they're claiming the flag. They're not running from it like a lot of leftists. They're trying to embrace. They actually have a group on Facebook called Wilco Patriots. It's an incredibly racist, woke social justice group. They do things like they take pictures of Will Johnson, from the Patriot Prayer Rally, the black guy. I've interviewed Will on this show. Will lives in the area now, and he comes out to their Black Lives Matter table once in a while, their burn, loot, murder table, and he mixes it up with them. And they hate him because he's a black man who's not woke. And like I said, they're mostly white, almost all white people. So this group of mostly white people that Brian registers in, they do things like take pictures of Will Johnson and then without his knowledge, post it in this private Wilco Patriots group and say incredibly racist and condescending and hateful things about him because he's a black man who doesn't agree with woke. That's Brian Register in a nutshell. He's at every event. He's the one I mentioned who was at our Let Women Speak event. He was at the Taylor Library event. He comes when we have events, he's there. I see him there. And when he has events, I am sometimes there and I see him there. So he's got the trans flag there. I will say something about Brian. My pastor had what I think was a great conversation with him last night, like a back and forth. Not every tool has the same purpose. If you think of yourself as a tool, like in the Christian faith, you say, we're supposed to be tools for God, or we're parts of a body and every body part is different. Like I might be the toe and the toe has a different job than the hand or what have you. And not everyone's designed with the same talents and the same capabilities and the same background experiences. And I am not designed to have a conversation with this man. I don't think we have never. Yes, I just don't think that would happen. Um, uh, but my pastor had a great conversation with him, and that was really cool to listen in on. And to Brian's credit, he talked with my pastor. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So that was a positive thing that happened. In the middle here, we have Jason Norwood. He's another public figure in Georgetown. He's also a transplant like Brian. I'm trying to remember where Brian's from. He may be local. Don't quote me on that. Like local meaning Texas, but don't quote me on that. Jason is definitely from out of state. He is now trying to become a political figure in Georgetown, Texas. He's always doing things to catch attention and be in the public eye, like trying to file lawsuits to get the statue moved. And he's always taking videos out at the BLM, the burn loot murder table. And he's an incredibly, I think, condescending, arrogant, and ignorant man. He's someone who's do you know the type who are that's a personal insight. I don't need that's a personal it's a judgment I don't need to go there. We're not going there. Anyway, this guy's always at a lot of the events as well. And then on the right we have someone who's not a public figure, so I don't know who she is. But I left her in this photo because of what she did, the behavior she engaged in at the event. And we're going to call her Wheelchair Becky. I don't know if you remember Wheelchair Becky from, she was friends with Barbie. They ended up, I think they canceled that doll after a while. But anyway, Wheelchair Becky here. When we first started, our little ragtag group of peaceful protesters started walking across the street. We were told you can't go into the parking lot, but you can't go into the parking lot where all the tables are set up and everything, but you can stay here on the public sidewalk. It's a public sidewalk, which is great. That's fine. That's all we wanted to do, is stand there with our signs quietly. We weren't chanting anything, and have conversations with people who wanted, if anybody wanted to talk with us. So as we start walking across the street, Wheelchair Becky, I didn't see her at first because I was turned saying something to someone as I was walking, and then she had parked her wheelchair blocking the sidewalk. Here, I think I have another picture. She had parked it blocking the sidewalk, and I said, "Oh, excuse me." And I genuinely thought at first that I had accidentally bumped into her, but no, she did it on purpose. Because then here, wait, let me pull up the picture before I tell you the rest. Wait. I think I have another one of her. Okay, this one here. I genuinely think some of this stuff is comical, because the way in which humans will act like children is just, I don't know, there's something kind of funny about it. And I think that's good. When you go to these events, you have to go in with like a spirit of, I pray anyway, help me have a spirit of love and joy and compassion. I know I have to pray that, because I know if people are yelling and screaming at me and they're angry and they're condescending and insulting, it's easy to pull that out of me or pull that out of any human. And so I try to pray for this defense, like, please help me go in with this spirit of joy and laughter and things. And so I do find this funny. So here you can see her in the middle there. That's the sidewalk I'm talking about. So as we cross the street, she's in a wheelchair there doing peace signs. She had turned her wheelchair sideways and parked it in the middle of the sidewalk. And then, so when I stepped, I said, "Oh, excuse me." And then she rolled back, and she just kept rolling forwards and backwards, kind of like Mike Myers in the Austin Powers movie, where he's backing and forward with the car in the hallway. She was doing that, so I couldn't walk around her. And she backed it up, and I said, "Oh, excuse me." I tried to go this way, and she rolled in front of me again. And I said, "Oh, excuse me." And she goes, and the whole time I don't know, she's saying condescending, rude things like, "Yeah, excuse you," yeah. And she's trying to roll over. She's trying to cause a physical confrontation, Wheelchair Becky. And wouldn't that be great for her if she managed to get someone here, a protester here, to have some kind of confrontation with her? This is a very deceitful person whose heart desires for violence, whose heart desires for that, which is a really sad thing. I say that not just based on the wheelchair thing where she was trying to cause a physical altercation or falsely claim one, but also based on the way she carried herself and the way that she was unable to view anyone as human who was there peacefully protesting, the way she was unable to have a conversation. She's one of the ones who, at a lot of these protests, you'll see people who seem as if they're possessed by something. And I think she is possessed by something. Doesn't mean it's a demon or an entity, but if you think of emotions or deep resentment or hatred or things as something a person can be taken over by, I think she's one of those people taken over by that. There were a couple of those people. Fortunately, not the majority of my experience, those kind of people. But yeah, that was Wheelchair Becky. Okay. Let me pause just a second. It's a lot of talking. Let me pause a second to look at the super chats. Lindsay Garrett for $5. Thank you so much. Says, how much do I need to super chat you to get you to do an entire show in your woke missionary voice? Thank you so much, lady. I don't know. I'll think about it. We should do a comedy video maybe in that voice. I really hate that voice, except when people are mocking it, like when Slocum mocks it, it makes me happy. Okay. Alex Lindstrom for $4.99. Thank you so much. Says, in Utah, we have a group of Black women who are incredibly racist towards Black conservatives and anyone who doesn't hop on to the anti-racist ideology. Yeah, they are incredibly social justice wokies are incredibly racist people. If you follow any person who's not who's Black and who's not woke on Twitter, you will see the ones who share the messages they get. People like Clifton Duncan or Adam Coleman will share sometimes the disgusting outright inward kind of messages they get from woke left people. That's why I mean, that's a whole nother topic. We could do a whole video on that, but they are incredibly racist people. They are condescending to Black people. They do believe that white people are superior and have more power and that Black people need white people's help. And that's why they're all these woke social justice BLM people out there every weekend are almost entirely elite, upper class, wealthy, white, wokies, cultural missionaries from out of state. That's, very nice houses in Georgetown some of these people have. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a picture, and this is about something very positive. So the best conversations I had all night. So as you walk across the street and you get next to the event, you will find this happens if you go to anything where there's going to be protesters or counter protesters or any kind of clash of these of people who are woke and anti-woke. There's a few things that they do that are weird. One of the things they do is if you have signs and you're not saying anything, I'm sure you've seen this in videos from Billboard Chris and others. They don't want your signs to be seen by their people. It's so weird. So they will do childish things like Wheelchair Becky did, rolling her wheelchair back and forth to try and block you. They will seriously all night put pride flags and stuff in front of you, or they'll put their own signs in front of you. And if you move a little bit to the left, they'll all shuffle and move to the left. And if you move to the right, they'll all shuffle and move to the right. Like, it's this weird game. It doesn't even make any sense. It's like, are your beliefs so fragile that you can't see somebody with an alternative opinion on the other side of the street? Like, so weird. You have to protect people. You have to protect people from a different opinion, some of whom in your audience might agree with this opinion. Maybe that's why you don't want it to be seen. And so that happens. And the whole time they're yelling and they're insulting, and some of them are trying to bait you and they're yelling, insulting things, and people like who have that resentment inside of them. And so while that's happening though, I was kind of standing there and I was holding my sign, and a couple of people would walk by on the sidewalk. So first, a negative encounter, to this old couple an elderly couple, even not just older, but elderly. This was a bummer. They were possessed by just complete animosity and animus. They were wearing Dr. Seuss, matching Dr. Seuss quotes, shirts. A lot of these people were drunk or drinking or on their way to being drunk, at least at the very least drinking, because they had vendors there with alcohol, with wine and stuff. And I believe this woman had a glass in her hand. That always, all to me, I'm like, maybe have this conversation another time if you're drinking, because people aren't always in their right mind and on their best behavior when they're drinking. But this couple comes over and she was just nasty. And what was weird is that I was finally having a good back and forth with one of the usual suspects, this girl, Jen, who's at every event. And Jen and I, for the first time, felt like I was making some headway. And I'll tell you about that in a second. I felt like we were connecting. It was good. And then this angry elderly couple comes over and she's like, why don't you just shut up and go home? It's like, excuse me? You don't even, I'm having a conversation here. What? Why would I shut up and go home? You should just shut up and go home. And I said, well, I don't think I will, but thank you. And her husband said something like, yeah, but you could. And I was, yeah, I could go home, but well, I'm not going to. So I like your shirts anyway. And she said something nasty and they wandered away and started talking to another lady from my church. Like they couldn't, everybody else, most of the people, most everyone there, to their credit, also just did their thing. They let us be and they did their thing and enjoyed the evening. There were drag performances, there was music, whatever. But this old couple was just like walking down from peaceful protester to protester to yell and speak invective. So again, that kind of person, red flag. I'm not going to have a good conversation with that kind of person. I'll just try to stay polite and, stand your ground. Like, no, I don't think I will leave, but thank you. Pay them a compliment. Hopefully they will now leave. Like, and so that's how I deal with that kind. So that happened first, but then this is the great part. There were two people who came up last night and talked to me about my sign and told me they agree with the sign. They were both trans women. So biological men, but trans women. And it was so refreshing to be able to have a civil conversation, a respectful conversation with someone who's actually thinking about what you're saying and vice versa. And I have to thank these two people. And one of them was named Karen. Now I'm going to put this picture up, and I know some of you guys are going to be tempted to make fun, but Karen was actually really great. You can still make fun if you want. I got Karen's permission to put this photo up. This is us together because it was such a positive conversation. Now, and I think this guy, he's definitely having a bit of fun. He's wearing a clown wig. I'm going to tell you again. We both look terrible in this picture. I'm sorry, but it's the only photo I got. It's not a great picture of either of us. But he's an older guy. And let me just tell you about this conversation because this is positive in my mind. So we started talking and Karen asked me what my sign was about. And first of all, this is one of the things I do. If people are taunting, which he wasn't doing, or even if they're not, I will sometimes say like, hi, my name's Keri. What's your name? If they give you their name back, that's a positive sign. That's a positive sign. Now it may go, no, you may not have any more positive signs, but if they do that, that's a positive sign. The really nasty ones will often say, it's none of your business or whatever, they won't tell you. So I said, I'm Keri and I'm Karen. And so we started talking, shook my hand, everything. What's your sign about? And I explained what my sign's about. And I'm going to tell you, what I said, because you might want to say this if you're trying to talk about this, and it might be helpful. And also because if there are any of the angry, resentful, woke lefties who were there last night who find this video or come to hate watch it, I want you to hear very clear why I was there and what my sign means, because a lot of you don't want to hear and don't want to know. And instead, you want to make up a straw man. You want to create a fake person in your head and argue with that person instead of actually talking to me. You want to yell at that imaginary person. So my sign said, you can see it here. My sign said, children can't consent to sterilization or mastectomy. So many of the angry, resentful ones, the usual suspects and so forth, hated my sign. I know it's hard to imagine that there are people who would find this sign controversial, but there are these people possessed by this evil ideology who think it's okay to chop up kids, to cut body parts off, to sterilize them. They really believe that. They won't have a conversation usually because they can't defend it. They'll just lob personal attacks. But so here's what I said. So Karen said, "What's your sign mean?" And I said, "Well, we're all individuals. We're all here. I'm here primarily to say I think that this ideology behind a pride event like this is really dangerous, and to protest it. And I think it's dangerous because I am against the transing of kids. I oppose allowing kids to undergo medical or surgical transition, because in society, we have all collectively agreed that children are different than adults. It's not just that we agreed that, we acknowledge that. It's something we can observe, that children are not fully developed, that children are different than adults. And we as a society have all agreed that it will be illegal for children to have sex with an adult, because children can't consent to that. Children can't consent to these things. Even if a child says, I wanted to, I consented, I chose it. We acknowledge as a society that doesn't matter. You're not capable of consenting to sex with an adult when you're a child. So we've said there are all these things that we protect kids from, that we don't allow them. We don't pretend that they can consent to. We don't allow kids to have sex with adults, to drive a car, to get a driver's license, to go out and buy a gun. We don't allow them to smoke. We don't allow them to drink. We don't allow them to get a tattoo. And yet, there are people who are now saying, but we can allow them to consent to making what could be permanent, lifelong medical decisions regarding their fertility and their reproductive organs, that they are capable of consenting to that when they're children. And so I'm out here tonight because that is not true. Children are not capable of understanding. When you're 13 years old, when you're 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, whatever, you are not capable of making a decision on whether or not you're going to want to have kids in the future. I've seen the consent forms from the different hospitals where they go in when they get put on cross-sex hormones. They have to sign, little children have to sign consent forms that say, I consent and I recognize it. It tells them, I recognize that this might make me sterile. How can a child consent to that? How can they understand that? How do they have any understanding of what sexuality is? They don't even know what sex is at that age. How do they know if they're going to want kids or not? We've, as a society, fully recognized that children are not capable of understanding, of consenting to sex with adults. Duh. And yet we're saying they're capable at that age of saying, yeah, I think it's okay if I become sterile, if I sterilize myself. Also, if I take my body parts off. What? So no, I don't think that children, of course not, are capable of consenting to any of the medical or surgical transition, gender affirming care procedures. They're not capable of consenting to a radical mastectomy. They're not capable of consenting to cross-sex hormones that could sterilize them. They're not capable of it. And that's why I'm out here, because a lot of the people at this event, at this Pride event, support that. They support butchery of kids. And Karen said to me, I completely agree with you on all of this. I've thought about this a lot. People should wait till they're 18 to make a decision like that. And so we had a great conversation after that. Now, we don't agree on everything, but I bet you we agree on many more things than those who are angry at us for being there think that we would. Okay. So I had this great conversation with Karen. I said, do you mind if we take a photo together? This has been so pleasant getting to meet you and talk to you. And do you mind if I post this and say, hey, we had a great conversation. We agree on some things. Isn't that amazing that we can still do that? That we can still talk, that I see you as a human, that you see me as a human, that I listen to what you're saying and you listen to what I'm saying. I'm not going to, this is going to be too long, so I'm not going to go into some of the things that we probably disagree on. But it was a great conversation. Yeah, Sonora says, damn, this was in Georgetown. Yes, it was. Okay, and so after Karen, there was another trans woman, biological man, who was walking by, a younger guy. And well, well, they had a dog with them, and I thought it was a Texas State dog. So I was talking about their dog. And actually, um, it just happened organically. We just started talking as well. And I can't remember this person's name, and I didn't ask for a photo, and I didn't want to because I could tell. I think it was Caitlin, but I think I could tell that unlike Karen, Caitlin was more and even said, like, I'm not a very public person. I don't like being in the public eye. That was one of the things we were talking about. And so we started talking about the same thing with Karen still standing there, and a second trans woman who said, you know what, I've thought about a lot of these issues, and I had a roommate for a while at this place, this place I was staying at, a hospital of some kind. I had a roommate who was 19 years old and already a detransitioner. And so we talked about a lot of these things. And on the one hand, this person was saying, I wish I had been able to maybe trans when I was younger myself, but I also understand all the problems with allowing children to do this. And I think I'm in agreement with you guys. That was amazing to have that conversation. Then we talked about some of the because it's okay for people to take a while to think through things and figure out what their position is. You should take a while. So we talked about some of that. And one of the things they both of these trans women said that I agree with. Karen was the first person who said it. Karen said, I think a lot of what's happening right now is that this is sort of a fad, sort of like goth was. And I was thinking on the inside, this is so funny because Mystery Chris and I just did a whole episode about goth, and I was making the same point. But Karen said, I think this is a kind of a fad like goth was, except it involves these permanent decisions to your body. And I said, yes, it is a fad. It is a fad. Look, because if you look historically, estimates say there's always been less than 1%, a very small percentage of the population who struggled with what came to be called gender dysphoria, where a person feels born into the wrong body. Okay. But now that it's being introduced to children, that children are being introduced to these concepts in kindergarten and being asked by adults and authority figures, are you trans? Are you cis? What are your pronouns? Figure out your pronouns. These are concepts that 99.999% of kids never had to deal with. You're introducing the idea to them. Just like in the Satanic Panic episode, Mystery Chris and I did the other night. They were asking during the Satanic Panic back in the 90s, they were asking those kids leading questions. They were putting ideas in their head. Authority figures. Kids want to please authority figures. When you have schools and you have churches and you have organizations and adults and parents who are putting books in the hands of kids that introduce the concept of gender identity to them, you are putting this idea in their head. And it's no wonder that there are a high number of autistic kids who are suddenly saying they're trans. There are a high number of kids who've been sexually abused or abused in other ways, a high number of those kids who are now saying they're trans, this ideology takes advantage of and exploits autistic kids, kids who are gender non-conforming, who don't fit in, girly boys or tomboys. It exploits those kids. It exploits autistic kids. It predates on them. It's a predator ideology. And the two people last night that I had overlap with, and we talked about some of this and talked about it being a fad and the dangers of this being a fad, and of so many kids who are being introduced to this and are going through a transition when they may change their mind and realize it was a fad or that wasn't them or they were wrong. It's so incredible to me that the two people I agreed with, of course, are trans women. So thank you, Karen. And thank you, Caitlin. If I might have got your name wrong, I'm sorry. I was trying to get a lot of names. But I really appreciate the conversation. Like I said to you, I bet we could sit and have a whole conversation about things and agree on a lot and disagree on a lot, but do so with respect for each other. I'm really glad I met both of you. So, let me take that down. So, in contrast to that, yeah, somebody says, Jules says, guys like Karen seem to often be the old transsexuals and transvestites who are now lumped under transgender. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening there. I think there's the old school trannies back when you could say that and it wasn't considered a slur, and it was trannies who used the word. Okay. Oh my gosh, this video might get blocked now. It's so stupid. I mean, look at Buck Angel. I think Buck Angel got in trouble for using that word, and he is transgender. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, back then, that's the word we all used. And a lot of these young wokies, I mean, if you are listening and you're some hate watcher, you have no idea. Wheelchair Becky, you have no idea who you're talking to. You're making assumptions. You have no idea where they're coming from. I was producing drag shows and working with transgender people when you were still in diapers. Like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, Jules says guys like Karen seem to often be lumped in. Yes. And so I think what's happening is you get a lot of these right now there's a couple things happening. You have the people who have absolute actual gender dysphoria, and again, that's less than 1% of the population historically, but who from a young age, historically it was always boys. It wasn't really that many girls. It was boys who before the age of 4, toddlers, would start expressing that they were girls. And in the majority of those cases, in what they used to do in these child gender clinics before woke took over and said, let's convert them, let's do radical surgical conversion therapy. That's what they're doing now. But before woke started doing that, you would have therapists. The people who specialize in this would go with the child, try to figure out what else is going on, if there's any comorbidities, if there's any sexual abuse or other kinds of abuse or trauma, if there's any other disorder. They would try and work through why the kid felt so uncomfortable in their body. Because the goal, of course, is to help them feel comfortable in their body. It's their body. No matter if they're a girly boy or a tomboy. And that used to be the standard operating procedure. And they would find that the majority of these boys would desist over time, that it would be resolved over time. And for the very tiny fraction of that less than 1% for whom it wasn't resolved, at some point, they would decide to transition to try and live as the opposite sex. Buck Angel, who I mentioned, was the first biological woman to undergo a surgical transition to try and live as a man in California, for example. And that was after years and years and years of trying other things. That used to be the case. Now, you can walk into any Planned Parenthood today, a young woman, you can get a prescription for testosterone. Like, there's no long process. If you think otherwise, you're wrong. I regret to inform you, you are wrong. Look into it. There are different, depending on the state, different guidelines with your, with some doctors in some states, but this can be done and is often done in the United States currently. So, so I think what's happening is you've got those people, Jules, who, that less than 1% of the population who absolutely experience gender dysphoria. But unfortunately, they're now living in a world that says that's not a problem. That doesn't treat it as a mental disorder. It is a mental disorder. But a society that no longer treats it as a mental illness and instead treats it as just something normal. You just got to figure it out, kids. Are you trans or are you cis? Figure it out. No. You don't do that with any other. You don't go into elementary schools and be like, it's time for us to learn about personality disorders. Which one do you guys have? Are you BPD or MPD, kids? Give me your acronyms, kids. What are your acronyms? You don't have any? And now you've got gender dysphoric people who are lumped in with all of these woke, misguided young people who are looking for a sense of community and belonging, a lot of them autistic, a lot of them abused sexually or otherwise, a lot of them gender nonconforming. You've got them all lumped in together, and you've got them lumped in with the fetishists, the autogonophiles, the perverted men who like to dress as women and go into women's spaces with the intention of making women uncomfortable. I'm not saying that's all trans women. I'm saying that's the autogonophiles, and they're all lumped in together now. Let me show you, after talking about that and the really positive conversations I had with the two trans women, I want to show you one of the worst people there. I'd say the worst people there were Wheelchair Becky and the Hamburglar. So this is the Hamburglar. I don't know. That's just my name for her because she's not a public person, but she was making a public spectacle of herself. So this here on the screen, the Hamburglar, this was a pretty vile person, much like Wheelchair Becky. She's one of the ones, for example, who was yelling taunts and insults the whole time. Like for my sign, she's one of these people who claims a false intellectual high ground and tries to make herself feel smart by insulting the intelligence of other people who she has no idea about, and has to do that because probably no one ever tells her that she's smart. So she has to tell you. She has to tell you so that you know. So, for example, she was standing there, and I think she must have said 4 or 5 times really loudly to other people about my sign, "At least she spelled it right. Right, guys?" And just this that condescending vitriol of about how, basically insulting us and saying we're dumb or that we're bigots, or every insult was sort of it was along the lines of "you're dumb, you're a bigot, you're wasting your time, you're pathetic," whatever. Making fun of the way people were dressed, making fun of just what they look like, whatever. So her whole thing, and people like her, and you can see she's 3/4 of the way through a beer there or something. She was drinking all night and got louder the more she was drinking. She did not choose to enjoy any of the block party. Like I said, the majority of the people were doing. She chose to stand behind the regular suspects, the usual suspects who are always there with the signs trying to block us. And she spent the whole night just taunting us, not talking. So at one point I said to her, like, "Hi, I'm Keri. What's your name?" "None of your effing business." Like that kind of person. Just a nasty person. who cannot allow herself to see you as a human being. I'm gonna contrast her to Jen. I think they're friends, but I had a great interaction with Jen, and I told Jen at the end of the night, "If you ever see this, Jen, I'm serious, and maybe I'm wrong about your friend, and I can be proven wrong. I'm open to that. But Jen, if you ever see this, I am very grateful I met you, and because I've seen you at protests before and stuff, and I thought we had a great interaction, and I would be happy to sit down over a non-alcoholic beer and whatever drink of choice you want and have a conversation with you anytime, because you're open to it. I can tell you're open to it." And but this woman, the Hamburglar, was not. And so it was she was insulting people. I'm not sure if it was her or someone else, but there were several people like her who were yelling these insults and stuff. And they were saying nasty stuff. Like, there's a woman from my church, one of the sweetest women you will meet, and so patient. And like I said, we're all different. We all have different talents and backgrounds. And this woman's patience is such a virtue, this woman from my church. And I saw her getting yelled at. People were screaming stuff at her that her kids are going to resent her and hate her. This sweet woman would just respond to them with kindness. And it was amazing to watch her. I admire her. So Hamburglar and others like her were saying really nasty stuff all night. And so this is where you can see her face. Look at her smirk. And the guy next to her was also a giant D-bag. They were insulting and condescending and being mocking towards a young woman who I didn't know, who was standing on our side of peaceful protesters. A very young woman, like, I don't know, somewhere between 18 and early 20s. And they were being really nasty to her. And so I'm going to show you a couple of video clips. Let's see. Rib Rascal says non-alcoholic beer and subscribing. Dude, that's what, if it's a special occasion, I'll have a non-alcoholic beer. When we were in Europe, that was because they had great non-alcoholic beer. So, and it was a special occasion. We were in Europe. Let's see. Hold on one second. Just checking the chat. Okay. I thought for a second, I was like, oh, I thought Hamburglar had come to the chat. Sorry. Let me see. I've got a video here. Which one is it? Okay, it's not that one. Now, I will admit that Hamburglar, at the end, I did what you shouldn't do. Maybe. I'll tell you this. I was able to maintain, if you go to one of these things, here's a bit of advice. You go in with a spirit. Like I said, if you pray, some of the things you can pray for are, you can pray for all the people who are going to be there who disagree with you. And especially the ones who might be angry, and pray for God to surround them in love and light and truth, surround them in blinding truth. And you can pray for yourself and fellow protesters, or if they're the one, if you're at an event where they're the ones protesting, pray for yourself and the fellow attendees, however it is. I pray for, give me a spirit of compassion and joy and love and a sense of humor. And let me say words that are pleasing to you. That's my prayer. And fortunately, last night I was able to maintain this good spirit for probably 80 to 90% of the night. And it's good because they'll say mocking things. Now, one of the things I do is when they say mocking things, like people like the Hamburglar, they'll yell insults at you. The people who are yelling, I've gotten to where I don't really interact with them. That's kind of my rule of thumb. And I would suggest you don't either, because they're a waste of time. They're yelling invective, and they don't want to have a conversation. And so I usually ignore them, and they hate being ignored. But it's the best thing to do. Just ignore them. Talk to the people like the 2 trans women I talked with who are open to having a conversation, and ignore those people. And if they're yelling stuff and you feel, just start talking to some of your friends who are there with you, or, you don't have to put attention on them. In fact, you shouldn't put attention on them. It might be good sometimes to get video of them. I want to get better at these events of getting video going, but you can get video of them, take photos of them, but don't give them too much attention. They're a waste of time and breath. They don't have good intent. Like Wheelchair Becky, they're full of, a lot of them, a desire for violence. One of these guys, I think it was a guy, my pastor said, one of them kept coming up to the edge of the sidewalk and going, to him, taunting him, going, "Step off the sidewalk. I dare you." Like they want you. They want this. Some of them want this physical confrontation. They're bloodthirsty. They're bloodthirsty people. The people who are possessed by that kind of resentment and rage and just nihilism, they're the people who are protesting what Hamas did. Not protesting. They're the people who are supporting, like BLM. BLM supported what Hamas did, brutally murdering people in Israel. It's that kind of people. If they could do that to you and get away with it, I have no doubt they would. I know that. That's not hyperbole. The people who are possessed with this kind of animus and hatred, if they could do something terrible to you and get away with it, they would. And so those people are a waste of time. The only thing they're good for is for getting video footage of a demon. Do you know what I mean? That's my take on it anyway. So don't give them attention. Don't let them bait you. So I ignored these people throughout 90% of it. And that's what I would say you do. The other thing is, when you talk to people like Jen, for example, you don't always have to talk about what's on your sign or the event. So there's one part where, like I said, it's like a silly dance where if I move this way, Jen was moving this way with her sign to cover me. If I move this way, she was moving this way. And so it's funny. It's absurd. So I just kind of made a joke out of it. Like, do you know the funky chicken? Can we do dueling dances? Kind of laugh with her. And you do that. And I was pleasantly surprised. She told, not only when I introduced myself, she told me her name, which is a good sign, but also she laughed with me. We had a few laughs. She was wearing American flag shorts. I said, "I like your shorts. Where'd you get them?" Because I've been looking for an American flag suit, like the lapel kind of suit. And so we had this conversation about that. We started talking about Pee Wee Herman. It was a good conversation. We didn't even have to talk about why we were there. But you know why I view that as a success with her? Because I could tell she maybe for the first time saw me as a human being who we might get along and have fun. And she even said we'd probably get along and have, yes, we would. I'm so grateful. That's a breakthrough. We would. And so everybody's different. Everybody's got a different talent, a different way of handling these things. Like I said, my pastor was able to have a conversation with someone I would never be able to talk with because of his unique background and knowledge and gifts. The sweet lady from her church, who I'm not going to name, she had a great conversation. Or she was able to defend off and be a great demonstration of God's love and of peace. Like, everybody has a different way of handling these. These are just some of the tips I would have. So in general, I think it is a waste of time to engage with the bitter ones. And I said I succeeded in ignoring them for 90% of the time, because at the end of the night, I let Hamburglar bait me. Hamburglar said at one point she was yelling, like I said, she was yelling taunts all night. And she yells out, like, "I hope you know it's a waste of your time." And I yelled back and I said, "I don't think it's a waste, thanks." And then she said, "Yeah, as if anybody's going to agree with your sign and change their mind." And I said, "Actually, I just had 2 great conversations with 2 trans women who did agree with my sign." And she goes, "Oh, sure you did. Where are they?" Like, she didn't believe, she can't even contemplate that there are trans women here at this very event who do not agree with medically and surgically transitioning kids. And I tried to say that, but of course, then she and Wheelchair Becky start yelling. And the thing about this is why it's a waste of time, because they yell and they're not listening to anything you say, and you have to increase your voice level. And then it's it's a waste of time. So I actually tried to yell loud enough they could hear that. I said, yeah, isn't it funny that the two trans women I had conversations with agreed with my sign, and we had a great conversation, and all of you wokies here, none of you are trans, who are out here, you think you're defending those people and you don't agree with the sign? It's kind of weird. Of course, they don't hear any of that because they're busy screaming stuff about how I'm a bigot or whatever they're saying, their assumptions. So ridiculous. So after that happened, I said, I didn't lose my cool or anything, or I didn't say anything I regret, but I could realize, I'm giving this bit of advice to you if you go to one of these things. I could tell that because I let her bait me, and I had that my anger level was getting up there a little bit. There's that quote about I think it's an Eckhart Tolle quote, what you respond to in another grows in you. I might be paraphrasing it, but I used to think about that quote for a while. What you react to in another grows in you. And so she's angry and hateful, and I could feel the anger rising in me. She was contemptuous. I felt the contempt rising in me. And so I said, okay, it's time for me to go. Like, I don't want to stay here anymore because I don't want to say anything I regret or whatever. That's a good rule of thumb for these things, guys. I'm serious. So, it was towards the end of the night anyway. So I told some of the people who were there with me, I'm leaving now. But as I was walking out, there's Hamburglar again. And this is where she was yelling at and mocking a young woman around, I don't know, maybe around the age 18, a young woman. And it just bothered me because, again, she's there pretending pretending to be so intelligent, so intellectually superior to everyone else. And I hate to say it, Hamburglar, but I could tell you're not. And neither is the guy that was standing next to you, because you can't have a conversation. You're incapable of having one. The thing about intelligent people, or even people who maybe they're not that intelligent, but they're confident, is that they're able to have conversations. Their opinions are not threatened by talking to people who disagree. Actually, they find different opinions interesting. They find conversation interesting. They find people interesting. They learn from it. They want to know more. They want to make sure that their opinions are backed up with evidence. And as it became clear to me, this woman doesn't know anything at all about what's happening to kids in so-called gender affirming care. She doesn't know what's happened in other countries. She doesn't know anything about the countries that have now banned it, who've done the systematic reviews to say, wait a minute, we should not be doing this. Norway, Finland, Sweden, UK. They don't know. The guy, he knew nothing about this. They don't know anything about detransitioners. And yet she's standing out there. The majority of her comments are all night trying to make people feel dumb, people who are younger than her, like this 18-year-old, insulting them, insulting their morals, insulting their intelligence. She has no horse to ride on. The emperor has no clothes, Hamburglar. So here's a little bit of a video. Let's see this. And this is on my way out. I left right after this because I was like, okay, this is pointless. This is why I should never break my own rule and engage with this kind of person, because it doesn't matter. They're not listening to anything you say. So I heard them taunting and mocking this younger woman. So I jumped in. I can't remember what I said. I'll be watching this with you. We'll see. So, okay, I remember. So she was saying, this young woman that they were ganging up on and mocking, she said, and if I was 8 years old and I heard, and so then this D-bag says, "Are they having gender surgeries?" First of all, she didn't say anything about gender surgeries at 8 years old. She said if I was 8 years old, she tries to clear that up. But I jumped in because I know I'm sure it has happened to an 8-year-old. If you go, I'd go and check. I don't I don't know that for sure, but I would guess. My guess is that yes, that's probably happened already. But I know for a fact, what I do know is yes, they are doing surgeries and double mastectomies on 13-year-olds. So I jumped in and said, well, they are doing it on 13-year-olds. And so then his dishonest tactic is to go, is it 8-year-olds or 13 years? Is it 8-year-olds or 13-year-olds? As if that girl had said anything about at what age they start the gender surgery. She didn't. She didn't. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry. I just saw the chat. There's no sound. Why is that? That's so weird. I have sound on my end. Um, hold on. Let me see if I can figure this out. Oh man. This is why I need a producer. Yeah, nobody can hear it. I don't want to waste too much time trying to figure this out. I might have to show this one in a later one. Boomer, Michael. Yes, it's true. Ah, man. Okay. I'm just gonna play it without the sound and tell you just here, let me mute it for myself. Look at her body language. So at this point, I said something about like, look at her face when she goes, huh? Like that. She was condescending and mocking like that all night. And when I said something like this guy basically said, do you think you're going to be successful or this will have to play out in a court of law? Because I said something about detransitioners, which they have no idea about. He goes, well, then it'll play out in a court of law. And I said, yes, it will. And we're going to put an end to this for children too, just like all the progressive European countries. And she's like, what? As if that's not a thing. And I said, yeah, in Norway, Finland, Sweden, the UK. And so he starts saying, this is so funny. This is what I mean about they reveal their actual intelligence. He can't talk about that because he doesn't know anything about that. He doesn't know that these countries have in the past 2 years banned medical and surgical transition for children. He doesn't know that those are the only countries that have done systematic reviews of the evidence. Not the governments. The governments didn't do this. It's not a political decision. The doctors did a review. In the UK, it was the NIH did a review. These are people who work, in some cases, at the gender clinics for kids who are looking at the evidence and saying, we have to stop this. They don't know any of this. And so when I said that, well, we're going to follow suit. We're going to follow what the progressive countries have done. We are going to ban it here for kids too. And he goes, oh, is that what you want to do? You want to do what other countries do? Like, what about Saudi Arabia? What do you want to do what the Muslims do? Do you like Muslims? He said this. They don't know how to defend their positions. It's a waste of time. It's so stupid. I'm sorry. And I know you guys are both adults, so you have no excuse. You have no excuse, Hamburglar. Hamburglar, listen to me. You have no excuse, truly. You don't. And you may not change your opinion, but you should respect yourself enough to be knowledgeable about the things that you're out there talking about, especially since you spent all night yelling at us. Obviously, you didn't come there to have a good time. And I mean, maybe that's the way you have a good time is to yell at us and not have a real conversation. But you should respect yourself enough as an adult to read a little bit about the news, about what's going on with so-called gender affirming care, to understand what are the reviews of the evidence that have been done, which countries have done a systematic review of cases, which have not. What do the procedures look like? Like, you should know about this stuff if you're out there defending it. It may not change your opinion. It may make it, but you know what? For you, bonus points for you, if you do this, it'll make your argument stronger. You won't have to rely on insulting people as much. You'll be confident because you'll know some of the stuff you're talking about, even if you're on the other side still of what I believe. You'll be more confident and you'll be able to have a conversation. you'll be able to defend your point of view without relying on childish insults where you try to pretend you're more moral and more intelligent than other people. Like, you'll be able to actually say something with any kind of value or content, something that's got meat to it. Because at the end of this, I said, she was like, "Oh, have they done a systematic review? Have they?" And I was like, "Yeah, you should go and read about it." She's like, "That's a no from me." She said that on camera. I'll get the audio to work later. She said something like, "That's a big no." Just nasty people. Um, Texas Sheep Lady says, "LOL, if they ever do the research, they'll see their error." Yeah, that's, I think, part of the reason they're afraid to do it. I don't know. It's also that a lot of these people are very intellectually lazy. And I think back to when I was in the social justice and woke cult. They think they know things because they've read headlines, because they are, oh, it's so weird. It's like being in a cult. They have this false belief that they are smarter than they are and that they're more moral than they are. And they have a very false belief and a caricature of what people on the other side are like. Like, for example, I said I had 2 conversations with trans women that last night who agreed with me, and she either couldn't believe that or purposefully pretended not to believe it. Because her false construction of who we are on the other side, "Oh, you're just transphobic bigots, and you just, their whole thing. Oh, what's the voice? I'll do the voice instead. "You're just a transphobic bigot. Like, maybe you should go to college." Like, dude, I learned woke ideology at Duke University. Again, you have no idea what you're talking about. "You're just a transphobic bigot. You should learn what gender diverse people are like. You should be around some trans people and some drag queens." Again, I was producing drag shows with drag queens and transgender people, by the way, when you were in diapers. So shut up. Say something that means something. At one point, I said to Wheelchair Becky, because she was yelling stuff at me, and I said, "Who are you talking to? You're not talking to me. You're having an argument with somebody in your head. Like, you're not talking to me. Nothing you've said is my opinion or things I've said. You could have that argument with yourself in your own head at home." Like, what's the point? Okay. I think I hit most of what I wanted to hit. I had a little list here. Yeah. Thank you for sticking around. I want to say this. If you were one of these young people who are there, like last night, there were some young people there who were part of our peaceful protest group who I didn't know. And I have so much respect and admiration for them because these are young fathers and mothers um and young adults who, want to start families. And I heard the invective that was being hurled at you. I heard the things people were saying to you. And don't you ever for a second listen to the whispers of the devil. Don't you ever for a second let that stuff infect you. You just look at behavior to know they're on the side of evil, whether they're evil or not. I'm not saying they're all evil, they're not, but they're on the side of evil. And you were on the side of righteousness last night. You were. And it was a pleasure to be able to hear some of your conversations. And I just want to encourage you to keep standing up for truth and love and light. And if you're someone in your town who goes out to these protests and you get all this hatefulness and these untrue things, the words of the devil coming out of the mouths of other people telling you things about yourself that are not true, don't you for a second ever believe those vipers, ever. And I'm so proud of you, the young people who are out there standing for truth and for love and for light. And if you're in Georgetown, Texas specifically, I'll say this. We are going to keep Georgetown normal. We're going to keep it normal. And if you agree with us and you're scared to come out and you're scared that people are going to call you a bigot or scared people are going to yell this stuff at you, come and stand with me. I'll be out there at some of these things. Come and stand with me. Get past your fear. Because if you have kids, this is about your kids' future. This is about your kids' kids. It's much bigger than about one organization here in Georgetown having a block party. This is an evil ideology, social justice, woke, all of it. It's not just the gender stuff. We know it's the critical race theory stuff. It's all of it. This is an evil, racist ideology that sells itself as the opposite. I was in it for 2 decades. I got out. It's possible to pull people out of it, but we need more people to speak against it in small towns. We need people who are not afraid, who get over their fear and come and stand anyway with us at events like this, who stand against this in love, in joy, with laughter, in truth. Get off of the sidelines if you agree. Get off of the sidelines and join us. We have a group we've started on Facebook. I haven't used it in a while. It's probably been a year. I just used it for the first time in a year. It's called Keep Georgetown Normal. We're going to start using this group. So find us. And we're going to have a good time standing up against this evil. I promise you. That's it. That's my call to action. Keep Georgetown normal. Okay. Monday is my husband's birthday, and he's going to be my guest on the live Kerfefe break at 1:00 Central on Monday. We're going to talk about his new album. We're going to talk about music. This is basically a part 2 of what we did last year. He's a super music nerd and history nerd, and he's just a big old nerd. I hope he hears this. I love this nerd. I love him so much. And I'm very honored that he'll be my guest. So if you want to check him out on YouTube in the meantime, you can find my husband's channel, Anthony Garcia Music. And that's going to be our Monday show. I hope you'll join us. Thank you for hanging out today. Wow, he says. Well, in a good way. It's okay. I'm a nerd too. You're my favorite nerd. I am very proud of him. He is such a history nerd, such a history buff and art buff, and he knows so much about so many subjects and always is learning more. And he's my hero. So that's gonna be our Monday show. I can't wait to do that with him. And cross post your Facebook on your locals. Okay, I know I need to do this, Kevin. Okay. Thank you. Rib says nerds. Wait, nerds. There we go. And yeah, happy early birthday to my husband. Okay, guys, I'm going to take off. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday at 1:00 Central for the birthday show.